Alrighty, today we're going to go over the hinge and some movements that we're going to practice to get better at the hinge. One of the things about the series of this videos is that when we do our workouts, the majority of the time we're working on increasing capacity or training capacity. When we're doing these warm-ups and when we're doing these little movement exercises here, we're going to be increasing the skill of the movement. So we're going to leave you to do your capacity training in a different time, a different place, but that's still necessary. But this is getting better at the movements themselves or the technique themselves. So first, a quick definition of a hinge. The hinge is sequential ankle and hip flexion and extension with a neutral spine. So that's going to look like this. So here, there. So hips flex, then knees flex, then knees extend, then hips extend. One after the other, neutral spine. So the three components of that I think that people kind of struggle with is, first is like making sure their shoulders are back and that they're controlled and stable. If the shoulders are not stable, it's going to be really hard for the hips to get the right movement and the right loading. Second thing is making sure the spine is neutral. So when the hips are flexing and extending, and then we'll do some drills on that. And then finally, as a third one is the balance. And we might have seen that before when I was doing that, but the hinge. But as we do this hinge, the most important thing is to make sure that the hips move back behind the heels as we start moving. So some people start doing this right here, but that's not really balancing, and you can tell even just by the tone of your glutes, it's not the same movement, right? So I want to make sure that the hips move back behind the heels. So first things first, let's do a little shoulder exercise. Shoulders lay flat on the ground. As you do this windshield wiper, what you're going to try to do is keep your shoulder blade flat on the ground. And when you do that, you'll see that the shoulder blade rotates a little bit and then comes in towards the spine and then down towards the hips. And that's what we want. We want that shoulder blade to be flat. As soon as that shoulder blade starts to pop up, try to put it down, come back just a little bit, and then strive to rotate and to move the shoulder blades. Second exercise is going to be a quadruped hip rotation and basically hip flexion. A lot of times when you're trying to teach the hinge, you have to clear that the person can actually move their hips, and a lot of times you're just trying to cue them on the deadlift and they just can't get it. It's because they can't move their hips. So here like this, you're going to take this top bone right here. This is anterior rotation. There's a bone here called the ASIS, or that's the short term, the acronym I guess for it. ASIS, anterior superior iliac spine. We're going to make that move forward, and it goes towards your femur, your thigh bone, and then back and forth. And then keeping your feet very deadlifty or looking like a squat, you're just going to move them backwards, your hips backwards, and then forwards. And then make sure you're doing this correctly. Put your hand right here and make sure that those muscles are staying nice and loose-ish, right? They're just, you can see them moving, but they're not doing this, right? Or that. They're just nice and smooth, like that. Then from there, we're going to make sure that the spine can stay straight. So lay on your back again. Nice deep breaths. All the way here to the ground. Make sure your belly can move and back. Just back and forth. Those three things, shoulders, some sort of shoulder stability or ability to flex at the hips and then keep the shoulders under control. Some sort of way of rotating the hips and being able to move the hips backwards behind or just be able to rotate the hips. Neutral spine. And then finally, let's put everything together, see what happens. So you're here like this. Again, make sure ankles are kind of in a deadlifty or a squatty type position. Hands on your back here to make sure that you're not doing this. Hips, touch the glutes, make sure your hips are fully open. And then all you're gonna do is move your hips backwards, move your hips forward. Move your hips backwards and forward. And those are the things that we're gonna do to practice the hinge, the bits and pieces of the hinge movement.